Scientology and the Danny Masterson trial, medical neglect of children, Russia a terror state, stoning as religious practice, supposed missing athletes, and more. Hello and welcome to today's news segment. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and I thought I would take a minute today to quickly address something for those of you who are not long-time listeners of the show. On the Cult Vault, we look at all things cults, coercion, high demand, and more. There may be articles in these news segments that are political, look at domestic abuse, or other themes that people might not directly link to the subject of cults. I plan to bring these news updates weekly as opposed to daily. And if you find this content interesting or helpful, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel so that you can stay up to date with all things culty. You can also find me at patreon.com/thecultvault to find ad-free and exclusive content. And now on to today's news. Here are the headline updates from the Danny Masterson trial so far. Danny Masterson, a second-generation Scientologist and Hollywood actor, is currently on trial for allegedly forcibly raping 3 women between the years of 2001 and 2003. Tony Ortega of the Underground Bunker, who has reported on Scientology since the 90s on his blog, is reporting live with a media pass at the courtroom as the events unfold. Instead of going into detail of the alleged victims speaking about their details of rape on the stand, I have taken the title of each update from Ortega and compiled it here in this episode to bring it to you today. By the morning of day 5 of the trial, a jury had been agreed, despite the defense's attempt to out any potential juror who has seen the Leah Remini documentary, Scientology and the Aftermath. On day 5, opening statements had begun, with the defense finishing theirs after the lunch break. By the end of day 5, Jane Doe 1 had taken the stand, alleging she was raped by Danny Masterson at his home in 2003. Judge Olmedo admonished the prosecution for referencing Scientology too much, which is a contentious subject for the defense. Jane Doe 1 spoke about Scientology members calling non-members wogs and that there was a no fraternizing policy within the religion. And by the morning of day 6, we were hearing that the defense attorney, Philip Cohen, was attempting to get a mistrial on the grounds that too much of the prosecution's argument and Jane Doe's testimony focused on Scientology. Philip Cohen has publicly spoken about how he feels the public views Scientology through a bad lens and that there is no way this could be a fair trial to begin with. By the end of her testimony, Jane Doe 1 had broken down in tears as she recalled the attack she had endured when Danny Masterson allegedly raped her. She goes on to detail how he pressured her into signing an NDA through his attorney, Marty Singer, who gave her a choice: sign the agreement and get $400,000, or be declared a suppressive person and lose everything. By the end of day 6, Jane Doe 1 had wrapped up her testimony, and by the morning of day 7, one of the jurors had approached the judge and asked to be excused from the rest of the trial after the graphic testimony caused anxiety. An alternate juror was later sworn in, and the cross-examination of Jane Doe 1 began with the defense attorney Philip Cohen taking the lead. By lunchtime, Cohen had challenged Jane Doe 1 on her testimony she gave in trial versus what she told the LAPD officers in 2004. Cohen then asked Jane Doe 1 about shocking photos of bruising that she had shown her parents, asking, "So where are they?" With day 7 wrapping up with Cohen asking Jane Doe 1 about the payment she accepted in 2004. By the morning of day 8, Judge Olmedo berated Cohen yet again for acting like a vexatious litigant, with his constant objections at the mention of Scientology in the trial. Jane Doe's cross-examination turned to redirect, and by the end of the day, her time on the stand was finally over. On the morning of day 9, we saw the first witness up to the stand, Sean Fabos, son of one of Scientology's biggest donors. It turned out that in 2017, he was recorded recalling a 2003 conversation that backed up some of JD1's testimony. But by lunchtime, he had been declared as a hostile witness after conveniently being approached by Scientology's private investigator in the halls of the courthouse, leading to the witness declaring on the stand that he suddenly remembered being on a 2003 trip to Florida. Jane Doe 3 then took to the stand, explaining how she was in a 6-year relationship with Danny Masterson. She started out by describing his aggressive nature, dragging her by the hair when she didn't want to have sex. Day 10 began with Jane Doe 3 detailing a second assault in December 2001, when she woke up to Danny Masterson forcibly raping her whilst trying to fight him off, which prompted her to go to the Church of Scientology and approach one of the ethics officers, who told her you cannot be raped if you are in a relationship with that person. By lunchtime, Jane Doe 3 experienced a panic attack, recalling whilst on the stand, discussing the consequences of being declared a suppressive person in Scientology. By the end of the day, Jane Doe 3 had detailed how she has experienced harassment from Scientology since she reported her attack to the Los Angeles Police Department all the way through to today. Yesterday marked the day of day 11, with Jane Doe 3 supposed to be undergoing cross-examination, but the trial took a day off, and so day 11 of the trial is taking place today. For full updates on the Danny Masterson trial, please head over to Tony Ortega's Twitter or to his website, theundergroundbunker.org, where there are regular updates coming throughout each day of the trial. I will also post the links in the episode description so that you can easily find where to access all of this information and sign up to Tony Ortega's mailing list. And now on to other news in the cultiverse. Jade Hobman for the Daily Mail Australia released an article detailing that a pregnant woman who is in jail for being complicit in the murder of a young girl is refusing medical interventions to help deliver her baby. Samantha Emily Crouch, who is housed in Brisbane Women's Correctional Centre, was sentenced along with 13 others after allegedly depriving Elizabeth Struce from having her insulin. This insulin was something that the young girl needed to survive. Instead of giving her the life-saving insulin that she needed, it is alleged that her parents, Jason and Kerry, and up to 20 other members of their Christian church, stood over Elizabeth Struce and prayed instead. Officers have informed the news site that Crouch has threatened to have the baby without telling anyone, and staff are finding her behaviour increasingly frustrating. It is believed that Crouch was part of a fundamentalist group calling themselves the Saints, and believed that God would heal her type 1 diabetes if they were to pray over her. Pravda.com has a short article this week looking at how the European Parliament has approved a request from the European Conservatives and Reformists political group to include a debate in the recognition of the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism in the agenda for the upcoming Parliament's plenary sessions. During the vote, 201 members of the European Parliament supported the inclusion of the resolution in the debate. 99 voted against and 61 abstained. The resolution is expected to be debated in the upcoming sessions taking place in November. NDTV have a recent article detailing the events of an Afghan woman taking her own life before the Taliban could stone her to death. After running away with a married man, the woman took her own life to avoid public execution. On October 13th. Her means of suicide completion was supposedly through strangulation with a scarf. An article on The Guardian by Annie Kelly details how an Iranian schoolgirl was beaten to death after refusing to sing a pre-regime anthem. When the Iranian security services raided the Shahid Girls High School and demanded a group of girls sing an anthem that praised Iran's supreme leader, Asra Panahi refused, along with others. Many were beaten and Panahi was killed. This comes amidst a rise in schoolgirls speaking out against the oppressive and abusive nature of this country, the regime, and their belief systems. Earlier this week there was concern for a climbing athlete named Elnaz Rakabi, whose hijab fell from her head during a professional lead climbing competition, which was being aired around the world. Rakabi supposedly went viral for ditching the hijab, and after the competition she seemed to disappear. Speculation arose that her manager had encouraged her to return to Iran, where she seemingly vanished. Although videos came forward of her hijab falling from her head during her climb, an unfortunate event that, at the time, was taken by some as potentially a rebellion or protest. Rakabi has since come forward to say that she is fine and the speculation of her disappearance is ridiculous. Molly Spray Reagan for the LGBTQnation.com website reports Republican lawmakers have introduced a bill to put parents who support their trans kids in prison for life. A Michigan bill seeks to brand gender-affirming parents and doctors as child abusers and even proposes life in prison as a possible consequence for facilitating gender-affirming care. HB 6454 would amend the penal code to state that child abuse includes when someone knowingly or intentionally consents to, obtains, or assists with a gender transition procedure for a child. The bill aims to include any hormone or puberty blockers. This is something that seems to be following on from anti-LGBTQ rep Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill at federal level that would make gender-affirming care for minors a Class C felony. Jamie Grierson reports for The Guardian that the UK wants to change a law to stop RAF pilots training Chinese military. Minister James Heappey says it is concerning that the Chinese are recruiting to understand the capabilities of our Air Force, and that reports have been released that at least 30 British personnel have taken advantage of a very generous recruitment package that is offered to them by the Chinese military. Heappey goes on to say that China is a competitor that is threatening the UK in many places around the world. It is also an important training partner, but there is no secret in their attempt to gain access to our secrets and their recruitment of our pilots in order to understand the capabilities of our Air Force. This is clearly a concern to us and the intelligence part of the MOD, or Ministry of Defense. A new TikTok craze has landed along with the fall season. According to an article on the Rolling Stone by Andrea Marks, TikTokers who see themselves as home decor influencers using warm autumnal aesthetics to further their following are using a trending song by none other than cult leader Charles Manson. The song, titled "Home is Where You're Happy, It's Not Where You're Not Free," sounds like it might have the right message, and most have admitted to not knowing where the song comes from or who it was sung by. But it certainly should not even be featured on the world's largest growing social media platform in history. Although Manson was forbidden to earn any money from his music sales, artwork, letters, or anything else from 1971 onwards, there are claims that there is an estate and that there has been a continuous fight over Manson's body and assets since his death. But I plan to look into this in more depth later on. Bang Shao for abc.net.au has reported lately that there could be some cracks in the cult of personality that has been created by dictator and Chinese president Xi Jinping. According to the article, a protester unfurled a banner on an overpass criticizing the president and his policies. The banner read, "Strike to remove the dictatorial traitor Xi Jinping. Stand up the people who do not want to be slaves." It was a rare showcase of rebellion in the communist nation, which resulted in the protester being arrested, and he hasn't been heard from since. Social media lit up briefly, with others speaking out against the regime. Although few and far between, acts that go against the CCP are not treated lightly. The article details that in 2018, a woman was locked up in a psychiatric institution for splashing ink at a photo of Xi. Xi Jinping should step down. If the ultimate line of reform and opening up is denied, China will be done, said Chinese poet Liu Yang in 2020, who was later sentenced to 6 years in prison. Pet Palin for thethega.com reports that 5 captives have been brainwashed by a trans woman leading a cult as 15 more victims file complaints. 3 women and 2 children were said to be held captive in Bangkok. After being rescued, the 5 victims were being treated for injuries including burns and scalds. Haru Hawangsiri was supposedly coercing money from victims, laying occult beliefs upon followers before making a run for it after receiving large sums of cash. Victims had endured name changes after gems and stones, were subjected to physical and psychological torture, with many other victims only now coming forward. The activists from Just Stop Oil have been protesting in extreme ways again after being in the news for tomato soup on the Van Gogh painting, gluing themselves to the road, spray painting the Aston Martin showroom in London, and now another member who took to the bridge over the Dartford crossing. This was reported in a Sky News article. Morgan Trowland, aged 39, climbed the bridge ascending more than 200 feet above the River Thames, sleeping in a hammock on top of the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge. The aim of the protesters taking to the bridge was to get it closed, disrupting oil supplies to Kent and the South East. The protester went on to comment that the suffragettes and Martin Luther King may have made people angry with their actions, but that is how change happens. An article by Richard Spencer for thetimes.co.uk looks at an American man, Saad Ibrahim al-Mahdi, who made critical tweaks about the Saudi Arabian regime, was arrested at the Riyadh airport and has been subjected to torture during his stay in prison, where he has been sentenced to a 16-year prison sentence. The 72-year-old Saudi-born project manager who emigrated to the US was accused of terrorism for making public statements about a journalist who was killed in Istanbul in 2018 by regime operatives. He was visiting family in Saudi Arabia when he was picked up by law enforcement. And that's the end of this week's news. I hope you have found this interesting. If you have, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to my YouTube channel. You can find me at patreon.com/The Cult Vault for ad-free and exclusive content. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast and bringer of weekly cult news updates.